Hi everyone. So I think this will be the last video in the basic tutorials, and we've done initial orders, we've done movement, and now for the third phase of any turn, fire orders. And let's face it, it's everyone's favourite phase. The movement orders are merely the entree before you get to this. Unfortunately, we're on turn one of this game, so there's not going to be a huge amount of firing, but I should still be able to sort of demonstrate the basics of how firing works, which at the end of the day is the purpose of the tutorial. So, keen watchers will remember that Jaquan 1 was feeling far more aggressive and had fully targeted its counterpart Jaquan 2, and you can still see the sort of bright green line of aggressive sensor lock there. Although, funnily enough, I do now notice that I increased the sensors and then didn't use that extra point to go even more aggressive, but that's my mistake. I was probably too busy concentrating on being educational. But okay, so what options do we have? One, we can see by hovering over the enemy there would be red lines coming back if they'd got any locks. So we can say with some degree of certainty that they have gone full defensive. They haven't even done the soft lock to try and return fire. They just want to close the distance, and while they're doing that, increase their chances of not being hit. This presents a slight problem for us because it will be genuinely harder to hit them. However, on the Jaquans, each has a pair of heavy lasers. And if I hover over them, again you can see the sort of blue arc of fire. It's a very wide arc, it's 120 degrees to the front, so you know it's very excellent for hitting people. Other ships have sort of narrower arcs, and you have to be a bit more careful how you maneuver in order to make sure that you can fire. Because at this point in the turn, if the enemy ship is not in arc, with your weapon, you cannot fire that weapon at it. So weapon arcs become very important, and learning what arcs your weapons have will inform how you move your ships in the previous movement phase. But as I say, fortunately, we've got wide arcs, and the ship that we've targeted is well within them. So, in order to shoot it, I want to left click on a heavy laser, and we'll just fire one for the moment. In fact, no, let's fire both. Since we've gone all out, fire both of them, and then left click on the target, and you'll see what comes up here is heavy laser twice, and it says approximately 49% chance of hitting. Now, a couple of things to note here. One is this is a laser weapon, which means it can't be intercepted. If this was, say, a particle weapon or a matter weapon, that would mean that it could potentially be intercepted. So for instance by the twin array, and if you look at the information on that, you'll see intercept -10, number of guns 2, so the twin array could reduce your chances of hitting by 10%, and then if it fired its second gun, it would reduce it by 5%, because intercept halves by 50% per intercept defensive gun on the same shot, essentially. So don't worry about the math too much. The point in this one is that the percentage chance that appears when you hover over that ship or you left click on that ship does not take into account intercept values yet. When we commit to fire and the fiery void works out how firing has been resolved, it will take into account intercept at that point, but not at this point. And so if this laser weapon could be intercepted, then I'm as well just reducing that number by 15%, and I would actually only have a 34% chance to hit. But fortunately, one of the benefits of laser weapons is that can't happen to them, they can't be intercepted, so I can take that 49% as the genuine chance of me hitting that. And I've got 2 heavy lasers to fire, so depends on how much a gambling person you are. Had that Jaquan 2 committed more offensively, then each point of electronic warfare that he committed would have increased my chances of hitting him by 5%. And again, this is where I mentioned a couple of times the defense F stroke S there, which stands for front and side. And you'll see 2 numbers there. The first one is the actual value to hit, and to hit rolls are always based on a D100, so it's always out of 100. So you've got a 35% chance of hitting that from the front and a 45% chance of hitting it from the side. Now, the reason for that is the initial chance to hit that ship from the front is 75 and 85, and those are the numbers in brackets. But because that ship has put so much defensive points, and each point of defense reduces your hit chances by 5%. So it's put 8 points. Let's right click on it. You see defensive EW 8. So 5 times 8 is 40. So essentially what's going on is it's taking 40 off the original value, so 75 goes down to 35. And that is the base value of hitting that ship from the front. And the front arc is the front 60 degrees. And then the side arcs is the side 120 degrees. So I'm shooting from the side, so actually the base chance was 85 reduced to 45. But so why is my chance 49? Well, a couple of other modifiers come into play. One is the amount of offensive EW that I've committed to this target, which also happens to be 8. So in effect, my offensive 8 cancels out their defensive 8. So we're back to 85% chance of hitting this ship. But it's 49. Well, the other modifiers that apply, the first is range penalty. So we talked about this before. Heavy lasers 1.65% per hex modifier. So for each hex distance between these two ships, there's a 1.6% less chance of hitting it. And so if we click on that ship and then click on that, we see there's 31 hexes between them. So I want to do the maths in my head, but it's around about what, an extra -50. And you're thinking, okay, so it started at 85, you took 40 off it for defensive EW, but then you added 40 again for offensive EW. You've then taken another 50% off. So surely you should be kicking around 35% chance to hit right now. I hope. If my maths are wrong, I'll never live it down. But it's still showing 49. So where does that 49 figure come from? Well, it comes from the last modifier, which is the fire control for the weapon itself. And essentially these are modifiers to show you how good is this type of weapon against specific types of target. So fire control is split into 3 values. One's against fighters, one's against medium and heavy ships, and one's against capital ships. Hopefully you can read this on the screen, but you'll see the fire control for fighters is -20. A heavy laser is a terrible weapon to use at fighters because it's really aimed at shooting bases and capital ships. It's terrible at hitting fighters, so it's got -20, which makes it incredibly hard to hit them. Medium and heavy ships, it's okay. It's got +10% to hit them, and then against capital ships, it's got +15, which again's actually just okay, but certainly shows you that this weapon is designed to shoot capital ships, which is what we're doing here. So, roughly 35 plus the 15 for fire control, and before you know it, so I reselect these weapons to fire, before you know it, you're kicking around 49% chance to hit, and that's how that's been worked out. Luckily, you don't need to do any of this yourself. The game does it all for you, but I just wanted to sort of demonstrate of where these numbers come from. And I'm actually genuinely glad that my maths all worked out there, otherwise I would have had to re-record this entire video. And in fact, perhaps I've re-recorded this video 3, 4, 7, 9 times. We'll never know. But what I do know is that I do want to try and shoot this vessel, and so I'm going to click the target selected weapons. And because I've got both of them selected, when I click this, both will be targeted to fire in the fire phase, and you can see the icon changes there. It goes to a sort of orange color, and that shows that those weapons are committed to fire against that target. The other weapons I have, those can't really be fired. So the twin arrays, their range penalty is 10 per hex. They are a very, very short range weapon, more or less. So if I was to try and fire them, you see I have a -205% chance of hitting that ship. I'm not going to hit it. In no world is that possible. Again, on the Thetis, I didn't do any offensive lock-ons with these ships, and we sort of discussed that in the initial orders video. But say for instance I wanted to, it's -75. It's, you know, it's also impossible to hit. Not quite by as much, but that's because it is a 2.5 per hex range penalty, but with no lock on, that doubles, so it's 5 per hex range penalty, 5% per hex, and again that ship is 27 hexes away from that Ventus frigate, so it's never going to happen. But that was a choice I made back in the initial orders phase, and that goes back to me saying how that's a very sort of tactical point of the game, the initial orders, where you really have to think about how is the movement, how is the firing orders of this turn going to play out, and sort of prepare your electronic warfare accordingly. And the other thing I just mentioned is I fired 2 mines in this phase, so you can see the orange hexes, those were the tiles that, the hexes that those were launched from. That just sort of gives people an indication. And these red hexes are where they're going to land. I completely misjudged where the enemy was going to go, so these energy mines, unless they deviate, which can happen, are just going to explode harmlessly, and we will see that in a minute or two. So, firing my 2 heavy lasers. My other heavy lasers, again, with this ship I had a soft lock on that. That only gives me a 15% chance to hit. For a weapon that's going to take 4 turns to recharge, that's too low for me. Those are bad odds. I'm just going to save it for turn 2 and see if I can get a better chance to hit with them. These are really, really valuable weapons. They do a lot of damage, and I'm not going to throw them away in a 15% chance to hit on that target. Had I read the opponent's motives better and realised that they weren't going to try and lock on me at all, I could have also gone full offensive EW with this ship and would have had probably a similar 49% chance to hit. So, okay, and that's pretty much all you have to do for firing. So again, just to kind of go through that one, bring up the ship control sheet. If you ever want to detarget a vessel, you can left click on the weapon that's been targeted, a crosshair symbol appear, click on that, cancel the fire order, and then you could shoot something else with it. In this case though, I only have one sort of target, so I will just left click on the enemy again, and then left click on the target button to sort of retarget, and that's then both targeted again. Okay, so committing my firing orders, let's go green tick and cross our fingers that we get a couple of good hits. And that slight pause there was just while I committed the firing orders for the enemy team. Obviously the game won't update until both sides have taken the firing orders. So, back, now we're in turn 2, back to the initial orders phase, back where we began. So what happened with the firing? Well, there's 2 ways we can find it. We could right click on Jaquan 2 to see if it's taken any damage. Because what the game does is it doesn't make you sit through the actual firing phase, it just sort of skips to the next turn. But it's more than happy to show you what happened if you click on the replay function here. It will take you back to turn 1, and you can watch the movement in turn 1. So we start to see how the ship's moved around, if we wanted to do that. But in this case, pause that, we're more interested in the firing. So we'll click on the firing, and then if you make sure that the log is open, and you can click here to expand the log to make it a larger box. That's all that does. And then click play to see how it went out. So here we are. The energy mines landed exactly where they should have, which didn't hit anyone. And here we have the heavy laser fire. So 2 heavy lasers raking. That's a type of damage, and there's many different types of damage in the game. And again, that's for another video. But 2 of them fire. The chance to hit was 49%. We knew that. And here you have 1, and then 1 in brackets, /2, 2 in brackets shots hits. So if you ignore the number in brackets for the purpose of this, and essentially it says 1 out of 2 shots hit, which at a 49% hit chance is probably what you expected. It then says Jaquan 2 damage for 22, total armor mitigation 12. So that means I had a possibility of 24 to 60. My weapons actually not rolled very well when it's come to damage, and there's always an element of chance here, because it's rolled 34 damage, and what it's saying is that the ship's armor, and you can see next to the health is A4, so it's an armor of 4, has mitigated 12 points of that damage, and 22 points of damage has been done overall. A couple of interesting things happened here. One, we've damaged the side of the ship by 16 points, so it's 54 out of 70 now. We've also damaged one of the weapons slightly. But we've only really glanced that one, because what a laser does is just kind of rakes across the surface of a ship. It doesn't. Certainly, raking lasers don't tend to just hit the same point and do damage over and over, or they can, but it really depends on how your dice rolls go. And this one, you see, we've just glanced light pulse cannon and we've not caused a critical damage. It's still got a green bar there which shows it's healthy, so not very effective. But what we have done is occasionally, I think there's about a 10% chance when you hit one of the exterior hulls is you can damage the primary hull, and so one of our laser rakes has gone through to there and has done 4 points of damage after armor 6 was taken off. So honestly, that's quite disappointing, but thankfully for this tutorial I'm just demonstrating how weapons work, and I'm not trying to destroy the enemy as quickly as possible. Okay, and then to get back to turn 2 we just click resume game, and that takes us back, and as I say, we're back to the initial orders phase, so time to start thinking about your electronic warfare, what you're going to do with your power management of your systems and your ballistic weapons all over again. And that sort of brings us to the end of the basic tutorials. So hopefully these have been helpful in telling you how the basic mechanics of the game works. And I would stress that, I mean, we've really just sort of been through the basics of how this. Once you start experimenting with different races and different shapes, it really does get quite interesting, quite complex, and that's a good thing, I think, for a sort of space strategy game of this type. So I will hopefully see you later. I'm planning to do a few sort of future videos just on the more sort of complex elements of EW, such as ELINT scout vessels, the different type of ballistic weapons, and different weapon firing modes, which if you haven't discovered yourself, feel free to sort of watch the videos that I'll produce in the future. Thank you.